Gnedich was another translator who stood for subordinating a translator to the author, for accomplishing the most accurate translation close to the source text. When translating Iliad, he aimed at not identifying Homer's idea with the Russian one, and especially at not ornamenting the original. Mostly he dealt with grammar. Until now, theoreticians in literary translation have disputed Pushkin's role in translation theory and practice. Three opinions may be outlined. Pushkin is both a great poet and a great translator. Pushkin cannot be called a translator. Kopanev wrote that Pushkin did not work out a theoretical system of translation, but his casual statements, assessments, and translations are of great value. Notwithstanding this wide scope of theoretical view on Pushkin's role in translation, the following should be taken into account. Pushkin's translations are inseparable from his own creative writing. His translations are very far from the source text. His translations are based on different theoretical principles. They are accurate, free, shortened translation adaptations. Pushkin translated only great works of literature. Thus, he contributed to the enrichment of Russian culture. Lermontov is often mentioned along with Pushkin among the representatives of the realistic tradition of translation. Like Pushkin, Lermontov treated translation works as if they were his own creations. He emphasized some elements of a work at the expense of other elements. He would insert his own extracts in translations. His translations did not mention the source author. From time to time, he simultaneously used different sources of translation, sometimes by different authors. In a word, for Lermontov, there existed no borderline between his own poetic works and translations. Vissarion Belinsky played a great role in Russian translation theory. Though he tried his hand in translation, he was great not as translator, but as a translation critic, who emphasized the translator's noble mission in bringing together cultures and developing the nation's aesthetic feelings, developing the language. It was Belinsky who contrasted prose translation with poetry translation theory. In prose translation, as he wrote, one can either add or reduce anything, or change the text. The poetry translation, he thought, can be adapted to the tastes and requirements of the reading public. Some years later, he thought that a translated poem should render the source text as closely as possible. Translation in the second half of the 19th century saw a great increase in the volume of translated literature, but most translations at that time were very far from the original text, as they rendered only the outline of the source text rather than its style. This period witnessed a change of status for translated literature. In the early 19th century, translation was regarded as part and parcel of the author's original creative work. The situation changed drastically in the late 19th century. Translated literature was shunned from the original fiction. Translated works began to be regarded as foreign literature, related to Russian literature only by the new language expression they acquired. It is also at this period that the translator and author were separated. One of the most outstanding poets and translators of that time was Afanasy Fed, who wrote delicate love lyrics and translated classics, Horace, Ovid, Catullus, and German poets. According to Chukovsky, Fed, the translator and poet, are incomparable. Fed as a poet was superb. As a translator, he took great care of the poetic form, nearly neglecting sense, so that some of his poems could be understood only with a reference to the source text. Fed himself did not only word-for-word translations, justifying his positions by comparing the translation with the picture. Thus, Fed, who literally showed in translation somebody else's feelings, was opposed to Zhukovsky, who gave voice to his own subjective feelings in translation. Fed preferred literary translation. Dostoevsky and Tolstoy were free translators, changing their original text greatly. Irina Vidensky called translators first and foremost to read the source text carefully, to associate themselves with the author, and then to move the author to our community and answer the question: in what form would the author express the ideas if he lived with us in this country? When translating, he would add pages which had nothing to do with the source text. For instance, Vidensky sometimes added pages of his own to Dickens' novels. He translated the phrase "she burst out crying" as «слезы показались на прелестных глазах милой малютки», and the word refuge as «приют, где я наслаждался мирным счастьем детских лет».